Today on the Fox and Buds show, we're here with Representative Nolan West from Blaine, Minnesota. Nolan, how are you? Thank you for being here. How's it going?
I'm doing well. There's a lot to get through, a lot is changing at the legislature nonstop, but I'm glad we were able to find time finally to sit down. I am sorry that was so difficult.
Yeah, no worries. Anyways, today we're going to be going over the Office of Cannabis Management's 2024 Legislative Proposal Summary. The basic points that they're going to be touching on are strengthening social equity, supporting the market launch with temp license, improving the application and licensing process, streamlining the supply chain, accelerating the office's hemp-derived enforcement transition, expanding protections for the med patients, and just a few other technical revisions. It says here, I'll include a link to this PDF in the video description for everyone to look over. Nolan, right off the bat, how do you feel about all the proposed changes they're making?
Well, some of them are very good. Well, particularly the ones at the end, the accelerating the Office of Medical Cannabis Enforcement, that needs to happen, expanding protections for medical cannabis patients. They make it so all the hemp retailers out there right now, they automatically are included in the lower potency retail license without having to go through a huge application process, which is important considering there's over 3,000 of them. So if they evaluated all of them, then that would delay everything even further. So those are some of the good parts of the bill, and they also automatically improve the medical retailers because obviously want to make sure people still get their medication. And if they had to stop selling for months just to get it right, that's not a good position. So those are my favorite parts of it. But I would say a lot of it I do not love, but I've been working with the author and OCM to try and, in my opinion, improve it. And they would agree that it's very much work in progress as well.
So let's just go through the other talking points here then. When it comes to strengthening social equity, how do you feel about that? Do you think we're going in the right direction when it comes to that or not? My opinion of this isn't one that's really based in any sort of legal, sensical meaning of either words. A lot of us in the minority communities would rather see people of color be licensed before anyone else, or people who have been disparaged against due to unfair enforcement of these laws if they're a nonviolent offender. But obviously, saying that and executing that are the differences between living in some dreamland and the real world. And I think that's the biggest dividing point when it comes to politics, is a lot of people have these idealistic scenarios. But, legally, if we did that, it's kind of just segregation again in a different form of the word. And I can understand why that would just get the state sued. And I've noticed that in the language of the Senate file, the number one thing everyone's trying to avoid are lawsuits that would inevitably just delay it all even more. So when we talk about social equity, how are you feeling about that?
Well, that is like one thing I would think we all can agree on is discrimination based on race is not what government should be doing. And they get really creative in defining what a social equity person is. And I find it frustrating because they say things like lives in a census tract with a certain poverty rate. It's like, well, people don't know that. People don't look at census tracts because you might live in a poor neighborhood, but then it's adjacent to something else that makes it not poor. There's a commercial zone that elevates it. There's a million different things to where that's super unclear. And then they have like you've been lived in an area that has had cannabis, inordinate amount of cannabis enforcement. And again, it's, well, if the goal is to help people harmed by this, if you just live in the area, that doesn't mean you've necessarily been harmed. I mean, the odds are higher, but it doesn't mean you've actually been harmed, which makes it unfair if somebody who has not been harmed by this is getting preferential treatment over somebody else who has not been harmed. I think where there is broad agreement and where what also wouldn't get sued is if they got rid of all those definitions and just focused on people with nonviolent marijuana convictions and people whose immediate family members have had nonviolent marijuana convictions. Because those people you can say got screwed by stupid laws. And that I am all about helping that. Like they deserve it, and that's not discriminating based on race, which is wrong. If you look at their first paragraph here, strengthen social equity, they talk about changing the ownership requirements from 100 to 65%. And the idea is like social equity applicants don't have the same access to capital, so they need to be able to part with some of their business in order to raise that money. The problem is going to 65% isn't enough. Because theoretically, like the logic is that they don't have the money to start the business and need somebody to buy in to provide it.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to put up $1 million? And that we're talking like on the low end 500,000, on the high end $2 to $5 million.
Easy.
For 35%. Like for 35% of a business, you're taking on literally all the risk. So it's not going to like this going from 100 to 65 is moving in the right direction, but it's still not going to help anything. So one of the main things I've been talking to them about is, well, let's move that to 51%. The whole goal is to give the social equity applicant the control of the company. And you only need 51% for that. The retort I've heard is, well, then they're going to get put into some deceptive contract situation, and then they're going to lose control of their company due to this. And my response would be, that's what will happen with this other. They'll either get $0 or have a predatory contract if they only get 35%. And how those are done, like you can simply write, okay, I'll give you $1 million, but you have to hire me on for 5 years at a $75,000 a year salary. So it's like that person gets to guarantee their return. And then eventually, well, if the money runs out, then they get to sit there and go, okay, well, now we need to negotiate this equity agreement. And that can happen after 3 years. It's another thing they put in there is that a social equity applicant can't sell to a non-social equity applicant until after 3 years. Before there was a total ban on it, which was dumb because the whole goal is to help these people who don't have wealth to get wealth. And if you don't let them sell their company to like Anheuser-Busch or, like once it's federally legal, there's going to be a lot of money made. It's like, well, we want to make sure that they get this generational wealth they can pass down. There's going to be a lot of money there. So moving it down to 51%, I don't think there's a credible argument against that. I think I'll be able to get that done because it still does the same thing. It has the same risk as 65%, but if somebody's getting half a business or as near enough to half, now it makes a little more sense that they would take on an inordinate amount of risk. Let's see. After that, they talk, moving from a points-based application to a lottery system, which that in general, I don't love, but there's a lot of credible arguments. I don't think there's credible arguments for the last one, quite honestly, but this one, I see where they're coming from. I prefer the points-based model because then we evaluate businesses and we're going to pick the strongest applicants. And the reason that's important is because at the beginning of the market, we want the strongest applicants to provide as much product at a competitive price to eliminate the black market, to get people working in this industry. If we go to a lottery system, by definition, now we're moving to minimum standards. So you can't evaluate a business. They haven't said what they are yet, but it'll be all minimum, make this minimum threshold here, here, and here. So naturally, you're going to have less effective businesses because it's a lottery, random drawing of minimum standards. Now, they've also done the lottery so they can separate it out because in states, many states have lost lawsuits due to social equity provisions. They want to have a social equity lottery and a non-social equity lottery. And in that sense, if they get struck down, well, then the normal lottery still exists and the social equity lottery gets tossed aside. So that's a smart move. I would argue what I talked about earlier. Let's just make it about the people who we know definably were harmed, and that would withstand legal scrutiny because right now we compensate people for wrongful imprisonment. There's already plenty of, as we should. The trying to make that expanded is what makes it likely. Well, they're going to be sued 100%. I already know there's going to be a giant lawsuit, and it's like, well, we could just avoid that, but it's going to happen. I understand. I'm not going to be able to change that, but so with the lottery system, the minimum standards, it depends what they are, but we'll have to see. And I think that's enough on that first paragraph. I kind of went on for a while.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I've been trying to set up some deals with local parties that want to get involved in the cannabis industry, cultivation, retail, you name it. And that percentage of ownership is actually one of the biggest barriers because what you just said is, once again, what I brought up of the ideal dream world versus reality. And I understand respectfully that a lot of legislators might not have that business knowledge and experience to understand how those deals work. But the truth is, a predatory deal can be made in any way. Like when I've consulted with billion-dollar companies and MSOs, the level of confidence they answer questions in and operate within is terrifying because they know they're going to get their way no matter what. You know, they've said it every time. In every state before you, MSOs moved in and took over. It's going to happen. And I hope we can prevent that. And the only way to prevent that is really honing out this language. I mean, this might even sound crazy, but even adding more protective language around a lesser percent of ownership if there are multiple parties involved. You know, what if there are 4 owners? Now you have a 26% ownership. They all got, you know, sub 20 and you're still the main owner, but now you can get more money and more experience and knowledge from people from different parts of the industry. One might come in and bring you cultivation knowledge. One might come in with sales knowledge. One might own the building. You know, I've worked out these types of agreements, and this is pretty common. A lot of these businesses, even the hemp industry ones, are owned by several parties. So, I mean, I think that's common sense, but hopefully we can work something out with that.
Common sense is not common,
True.
unfortunately.
Yeah, true. On to the next topic though, supporting the market launch with temporary license. It says proposals.
Actually,
Uh,
one more. Thought of something to talk about what you just mentioned, and then I forgot it. Then I remembered again. I
oh
was
yeah,
really
go ahead.
so why those multi-state operators are so confident is because, and this is one interesting thing that the community might not realize is when cannabis is federally descheduled and federally legalized, that means all these restrictions, most of these restrictions are not going to be valid because it's a violation of the interstate commerce clause of the United States Constitution. And that's why those multi-state operators know you can't discriminate against us if we're from another state once it's federally legal. Right now, it's a gray area. It's kind of just the Wild West. Every state can do what they want. But
Yep.
that's what's interesting is, well, we might lose a lot of this authority. Well, we will lose a lot of this authority as a state once it's federally legalized. So it's like, yeah, we're all excited. Like I mean, it's stupid that it's ever been scheduled. It's completely ridiculous. And we're all excited to see that happen. But there are also, that's going to have all these other effects. I think a lot of people don't, I mean, I don't even know all the effects. So I don't realize a lot of it. There's a lot that is going to be unpacked when that happens. So that is one thing that if we take so long to get ramped up that happens before we're done, oh, that honestly is probably the worst case scenario.
And yeah, that kind of ties into a follow-up with this too, which is in the grassroots community, the understanding too is, you know, maybe if this takes longer, you know, the Biden admin might reschedule weed so we can avoid 280E and have all those benefits. But what you just said too is we are inevitably barreling towards federal legalization, which means all the big players can come in and steamroll us. So
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of saying that we need to really stay on top of this and get it done now while we hold that state level advantage that can actually put on the state market and put on all of our local businesses.
Well, particularly in the social equity space, is if your goal is to get those set up so they can operate as a small business before that happens, well, that needs to happen now. If they've only been operating for 2, 3, 6 months by the time this happens, they're probably going to get steamrolled like immediately. Because, well, just
Mm-hmm.
I talked to the brewer, a bunch of whole beer wholesalers and people in the liquor industry, and as soon as they had uh, the farm bill passed and then state regulations in regards to hemp derived beverages, now it's like 15-20% of their business. And and that is huge, big business, 15-20%. That we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Mm-hmm.
these players are just waiting and they're very good at what they do. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next topic here, the subject of supporting market launch with the temporary license. It looks like they're just kind of talking about the lottery system and just other clarity. And
So
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to cut you off there.
Oh no, you're
So
fine.
so the temporary licenses, so but what they mean by that is you get temporary approval. You don't get a temporary license. So
Mm-hmm.
because you have approval, you can go out and raise money but only for social equity applicants, they are saying. You can go out and raise money for your business. So because you have this piece of paper from OCM that says you're going to get a license when we do licenses. And I kind of think, I wish it was actual temporary licenses, because that hardly solves any problem that still we're going to be barreling towards an undersupplied market. And especially when you look at if it's only relegated to social equity applicants, and what they're all saying is that social equity applicants don't have the capital. It's like, well, they're not going to be able to, like, yes, they need this to get up and running, but like that's not going to be enough for the market. It's not going to be enough of a lead in. So what I would like to see there is, rather than temporary approval, let's give actual temporary licenses for things that need to be done for retail sales. So that would be cultivation and testing, those kind of things, like not retail sales. Those we can do temporary approval and let them figure that out. But if we're going to sell product that was grown in Minnesota, we need to grow it first. And so right now it's so frustrating because it seems like they're neglecting that fact. Like if you're not growing now, we're not going to have product for what, like 5-6 months or something like that. And even then, you probably need multiple grow cycles to actually supply the market. And this, I like the idea, like direction, but not nearly far enough.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of a lot of lip service in the sense of we're gonna do this so we look good, but in reality, it doesn't give you the real advantage that we actually need to establish a thriving market from the get-go. I mean, it makes me anxious. I can put it that way.
Yeah, I voted for this, and that's what's frustrating for me. It's like, man, I voted for it. What's the right? The overarching policy is so right, but I feel like it's not being done correctly, and I see a real big disaster on launch. And that's just gonna, well, it's either going to be a real big disaster or it's going to be delayed, which is a disaster in its own right.
Yeah, it seems like too, in regards to some of this language, the grassroots guys, all of us are a little fearful for the rewording where they increase canopy limits, and then the number of licenses they're going to be granting to everyone as a whole seems like almost too many. If you assume every licensee is going to establish the max amount of retail stores that they can, you know. So it's a little up in the air because like from the day of launch and the opening of like the first potential retail store, yeah, we might be underserved as a state, but the long-term ramifications of this could almost be the MSOs or just even big state operators that might be able to grow tens of thousands of square footage of canopy are going to still trump all the micro license holders who only have like what, 5,000 is it still? So the cost per ounce is just going to be so polarizing when you have the small license holder maybe selling at around the $300 range, when the big operators could probably profit off an $80 O, you know? So I'm not sure if there's any way to add more safeguards in regards to that. Maybe I think what you said is probably the only realistic solution, is giving the social equity applicants a real advantage of opening their doors, you know? But other than that, I'm not even sure, other than just lessening the amount of licenses and lessening the actual amount of canopy for the state as a whole.
So two things on the number of licenses. So first, the numbers that you're seeing in the bill, they have, at least, I don't know if they said this publicly. They've told me, and I 100% believe them. They're like, these are placeholders. We're just getting numbers in while we figure it out. I think they might have said that. But I would caution that it's too many, because one big frustration I have is, so with the lottery system, the applicants are going to have 18 months to use their license that they are awarded. 18 months, year and a half.
I saw that.
So, oh, there's all these licenses. Well, I hope, like, if they don't do a lot, what if say 15% of them are holding it for a year or more? And that's probably on the low end, especially considering like the argument that they need to raise capital and secure building, because they also eliminated the property requirement, which I understand eliminating the property requirement, but they better replace it with something that says like you must be under contract, or you must have like 6 or 5 or 3 proposed sites. And why is one, we want to make sure they're up and running. We don't want them to take the whole 18 months. That's crazy. I mean, I think it should be cut down to at most 12 months because what? We're not going to have market for another year and a half. That's crazy. Especially when we were promised it at the beginning of 2025, which already was slower than over half of the rollouts, I believe. I haven't double verified that, but I know there were a lot of rollouts that were faster than this. So we know they're going to distribute these licenses, but they might not be used. And then you also have to count for the ones that fail or that just can't really function. And that's going to account for, I think, a lot more licenses than we realize. And the whole goal here is to have a functioning market. And well, the whole goal for me is to have a functioning market and eliminating the black market so that people can have a safe and regulated product to consume without having to worry about, getting arrested for some stupid reason. So I think that I mean, and we can disagree like civilized adults.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, of
I like
course.
the number. I say more and more licenses because if we're going to have that long window, which I think should be shortened significantly, we're going to need the buffer. And then on the canopy side, I think so. If you look at the liquor industry, which people love to compare it to, craft operators have operated incredibly effectively, selling beers at $15 a pint. So it's even, and they even sell those in the same stores that you can buy the cheap beer. So I don't necessarily think, even though weed is a little different, I would say it is definitely different. So it's not a perfect analogy. But craft operators are operating in a space where there's these giant players who could technically roll them over and they still operate effectively. So I don't share that dramatic fear of canopy size. I would love to see I want everybody to have canopy size. I want everybody to have maximum flexibility to deliver cheap and quality product. Because if it's all too expensive, it again defeats the purpose and people will just stick with their dealer on the black market. And that is what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah, it seems like your points are based in reality. I can't really fault any of them. Um, and I agree with a lot of them. I
It's
mean,
like an
that's just the
ideological
reality.
disagreement, which is fair.
Yeah, no, I get it. But yeah, I mean, business wise, I see it all the time in any industry, businesses come and they go. The pandemic showed that to maybe an extreme. So I don't think people should just kind of brush that over. And in the cannabis industry
Mhm.
specifically, I've consulted with so many out of state players from small businesses to big businesses. And it's pretty common that within the first 3 years that a lot of smaller businesses do go out of business. And it's also very common that not every license holder will make and take advantage of opening the max amount of retail stores. So, I mean, I do understand where you're
Yeah.
coming from with needing that buffer. That sounds like a very reasonable thing, especially when your perspective of this is making sure our state on day one can have a proper regulated and well-established market that actually is going to succeed versus needing a lot more changes down the line, while also balancing that and the time frame of giving all these people the advantage to be established enough to actually have a footing against any of the big MSOs. So, I mean, you politicians are kind of in a conundrum here, it sounds like. Any of the legislators. Okay, so the next topic at hand is improving the application and licensing process. And this is just kind of going over reducing the risk of bottlenecks and delays by clarifying the existing language for the application process and enforcement authority. And it removes various requirements for the applicants, which you kind of already brushed over.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest part, all of that is a lot of like minutia that's fun. Like it's just making things make more sense. Except for the property thing, which I already did talk about. I hope like, oh, I guess there is something to go in more of that. So I mentioned that they should at least have suggested properties or be under contract or have some sort of idea of what properties they want. Because in the current bill, you have to submit your ventilation plan, your security plan, your water management plan, and all these things that are very, very important. But you really can't submit those plans if you don't have a building.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the reality of it. And the state should be evaluating those plans. So if the state authorizes somebody to function and they have a terrible uh, wastewater plan, well, that's a big concern for many reasons, environmental and cost. and there will be regulations post that, but I liked it when we were evaluating those things, so we can make sure we have the best and cleanest operating businesses. Without the property requirement, I do not know how you do that. Now they'll determine some stuff in rules, and there might be it might be just fine, but I'm I'm very suspect. And the biggest problem with the property also is if it's just going to be no property required at all, and you just have to figure it out. That means more applicants than not would be using closer to 18 months instead of 3, because it takes at least usually around 6 months to close on a property, especially a big property. And we need to get those cultivators up and going right away. Like they should be growing right now to start 2025 or early 2025. I don't expect retail sales until late 2025 at this point. And I like technically that might not be the case, but it's this bill still is probably going to be debated for another 4 months, and then, or well, 2 months, and then they have to go through the rulemaking process, which is going to be 6 months to a year. And it's unless they're willing to do a little more risky plays. And what I mean by that is authorize more things in statute to get real temporary licenses, not this temporary approval. They're very worried about that. Like, oh, well, what if we do something wrong? And it's like, well, we need to get cultivators up and running. Now, let's prioritize safety because you got a lot of hot lamps and you got wastewater and all these things you have to be very concerned with on solvents and all that kind of thing. So let's focus on the safety aspect. And then the other aspects, let's just do what we can. It's really frustrating because it's just going to get delayed and delayed and delayed. And that's not how the bill was sold to me when I voted for it. It was sold to me. I was already upset about having to wait till 2025 for this market to start. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, we can move towards like I would say the best thing for everyone, moving towards a temporary licensing system that is actually a temporary licensing system and not just temporary approval.
We've already covered a few points out of the OCM 2024 legislative proposal summary. And what we're talking about next, if I recall correctly, would be streamlining the supply chain. What are your thoughts on that? I think that looks like a pretty well-structured idea. I think kind of allowing the market to be more free and open for the medical side of things is just great. Competition's usually a healthy thing, in my opinion. I don't know if you have anything to add about that or not.
Yeah, you covered it. It's a good idea, and I think everybody's pretty much in agreement on that. So it's no fun. Let's fight about something.
Let's fight about, okay. The next point would be accelerating the Office of Medical Cannabis and Hemp-Derived Enforcement transition. What do you think about that? I'm guessing that's just kind of a way to get all the hemp businesses that are existing right now into the licensed industry that is cannabis whenever the licenses actually become available.
Yeah, so the Accelerate Office of Medical Cannabis, what that means is increasing current enforcement. So you have a lot of hemp businesses that are straight up just selling flower and having a good time of it. And it's like, you know what, maybe it's better sold there than on the street as it is right now, but that's not how it's supposed to be because there's no regulations around it. But they couldn't enforce it because the Department of Health had the authority to regulate it. Wait, the Department of Cannabis had the authority to regulate it, but the Department of Health was doing the regulation at the moment. So they need to get that transition over so that they can enforce the current law. Because right now it's technically illegal, but the people doing the inspections and enforcement have no authority to regulate it, which is kind of a funny situation, funny loophole to be in. So
Oh, I see.
that is their goal there, is make it so that they can get the authority quicker to regulate that, which honestly, yeah, I don't know how many people are excited about that listening to this podcast. I am not particularly excited. I see why they're doing, like, it's like, well, we got to enforce the law. I get that, but it's sometimes the law is stupid. As the whole, that's kind of the theme of this whole legislation, the whole reason that we needed to legalize. And then the other thing, so the hemp-derived issue is there are over 3,000 registered hemp businesses right now through the OCM portal. And if they had to go through a licensing process like all the other cannabis businesses, the department would just be non-functional and overrun with too many applications.
Mhm.
And they are so limited on what they can and can't do that it's not a huge deal. As long as they're already in compliance, it'll be fine, because you're talking about gas stations, not dispensaries. There are some hemp, like nothing but hemp and those kind of places, which are great, that sell a lot of different hemp derived products. But most of them are, just selling a few hemp derived products in some business that sells other things. So
Yeah.
making them jump through all the hoops really doesn't make sense, and it would bog down the department. So that's also another good thing in this bill that should just go through without issue, I hope.
And that's just strictly for the retailers that are selling to the consumer with edibles or whatever drinks,
Well,
or is it
that's
going to be
well,
for the
I
dispensaries
would
as
say, if
well?
you want to think of it completely, it would be think the like a liquor store selling hemp derived
Hmm.
THC beverages. That would probably be the main thing. And then there's also like gas stations and all that. And then there's also the manufacturers like producing the product as they do now. I know I've toured a couple sites, and they run a good ship. They're doing everything right. And that is actually doing everything right is also another thing to mention here. Is one of the reasons they're doing this is to incentivize compliance. So right now, like, these businesses can basically do whatever they want because the enforcement is so haphazard and unprepared. Uh, they want to incentivize them to follow the law, the current law. And if they do, then they get an automatic license. But if they don't, then they might not. And that is also part of this.
Yeah. Compliance is a huge key in this heavily regulated industry. And the biggest thing I've noticed a lot of people have experienced is in the other states, a lot of these legacy market players get into this industry and they aren't really good at following the rules all of a sudden because they never
No
had any
way.
to follow with to begin with. And uh, I know I've said it once and I'll say it again, but everyone I've talked to that has the confidence and the know-how is very, very serious about compliance. A lot of these people aren't dinking around having a giant what's the word here? Four greenhouse big illegal grow hidden somewhere. They're not even gonna risk it because you know what's you're not thinking long term. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it's like when you got hundreds of thousands of dollars to $1 million on the line, yeah, people people's attitudes change pretty quick.
oh yeah. On to the next point of expanding protections for medical cannabis patients. The only thing I want to say about that is there any language in there that would like allow medical patients to, grow a larger amount of plants at home or like refine their plants into their own oils? I guess I didn't see anything that really popped out specifying that, but that's what I'm
No,
looking for.
no, that there is not in the present bill that this proposal covers. You have to remember that the Office of Cannabis, I'm actually very impressed with the staff they've hired so far. They are, well, one, they admit what they don't know, but two,
Hmm.
they've learned a lot on the job, and they're very reasonable and serious about it, and they do great work. Uh, but they're also regulators. And what I mean by that is they're not their goal isn't like max freedom, let's all get after it. Their goal is to regulate the industry. So
Hmm.
they're not excited about, as far as there's the puppy. Um, they're not excited about just, getting people to grow more in their own homes. That's not necessarily what they would like to see.
I
Uh,
see.
the but there is a proposal by Representative Jess Hansen on this issue of if you're a registered medical patient, and there is dog number two. Oh, I should unblur.
Hey,
You know how adorable they are.
they are
I'm
adorable.
actually sitting on the ground.
I didn't know.
Blur my. Hey, Charlie. Oh, there he is. Look at how cute he
Oh
is.
my gosh.
He's a cute boy. Yeah,
What a cutie.
yeah. And then Maggie, it's my other dog. Yeah, there she is. He's rambunctious. She's very polite. And yeah, they're just gonna be in frame, I guess. Um, Although my wife would probably be mad that I'm showing the house because I am not a very clean person. But anyways,
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
uh, what were we talking about? Dogs cleared my memory.
You're saying Jess Hansen was working on
Oh
something
yeah,
for medical
Representative Jess
cannabis
Hansen
patients?
is working on a bill that allows registered medical cannabis patients to designate a caregiver, and that caregiver can grow additional plants to supply them. I
Okay.
think that bill will be heard Monday, actually.
Okay.
So that is being considered in the larger bill, and she's been a really big deal in this space. So I assume some form of that will be adopted.
Yeah, I hope so. I only bring up what I brought up because I was a medical patient for a while, and I was like the definition of every other statistic, which the research showed a lot of us on average were spending $500 a month on our quote unquote medicine. Um, and you know what? Your insurance doesn't cover that. And that's not a cheap amount of money for a lot of people. But I think what really was unfortunate to witness was a lot of these people were at like end of life situations, terminally ill. And it's just like, dang, we really out here price gouging the people dying. So I don't know,
Yeah,
giving them some
not to
form of
mention
relief.
medical bills.
Exactly. So giving them some form of relief and ability to like more affordably obtain this medicine, I think would be really, really important. But I know we can't do everything at once, so I digress.
Yeah, so House File 3766, I just quickly looked it up. It is being heard Monday at 1 p.m., the 1 p.m. Commerce Committee hearing, which my hemp bill is also being heard Monday. So that's fun. Uh,
Exciting.
so that it is going to be heard, and we'll see what happens to it then.
Okay. Um, we're on to the last little point here, which is just technical revisions, additional revisions clarifying definitions and establishing authority for the OCM to basically regulate the market and inspect and do recalls and whatnot. Sounds pretty
Yeah, that's
straightforward.
no, it's literally, yeah, it's just technical, like just moving where things are in law because it makes more sense in another place. So, yeah, very
Awesome.
technical.
Is there anything else then you wanted to add or talk about when it comes to this, or any other aspects that you
Well,
wanted to mention?
yeah, I guess, I mean, what I would want to really hammer home is, in my opinion, they're not taking a quick market. They're not considering how slow this is going right now. It's with the 18-month license thing. Okay, honestly, the background is just killing me. Let's blur it again. There it is. With the holding a license for 18 months and the changes they're doing, it's like they're not really considering. I mean, well, they've already given up on the first quarter of 2025. And
I see that.
that that's embarrassing. Like, in my opinion, it's straight embarrassing. It's so many other states have done this so much better. And like they hired this consulting firm that has worked in half of these states. And it's so what's going on here? It's very, very frustrating because it's right there to do. It's been done before many, many times,
Hmm.
and we're still just dragging our feet, debating minutia when we could just move forward on a market. And the biggest thing I'll be focusing on, I would love to rewrite probably 70% of this bill, and
Really?
I I think I could make it much, much better, but I'm not in the majority. So I only can work around the edges, and I will work around the edges the best I can. So the one thing I would want to focus on, so I've got a bill about the hemp stuff that I'm trying to re-legalize some hemp products they made illegal. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous that in this legalization bill, they made products that were federally legal illegal. It's kind of ironic considering this whole issue is from federal prohibition and then they prohibit products. So I have a hemp bill that I think will go through and will be able to fix a lot of those issues, but they're not taking timing seriously. So we're going to be delayed and delayed and delayed. And then especially when you look at the 18-month things, delayed even more. And this could get pushed from where I'm sitting watching, could get pushed to fourth quarter 2025 is where I see it. And that's ridiculous considering when we passed the bill. And what I think, if I was going to narrow my focus to one thing I want to change, one thing is we need cultivators to start before everyone else, obviously, if we want Minnesota grown product to be sold. So let's make sure that cultivators get early operating licenses, not just temporary licenses to say they can do something, but they need to operate to provide the product for when the market starts. And if that doesn't like until that happens, the timer for when it actually starts doesn't start. Right now, the timer is infinity until there are legal plants in the ground, legal as in sanctioned to be sold when the time comes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not being treated seriously at all. And that's really frustrating. I've tried to be mostly positive. I feel like I have been through this, but you look at it, it's just like, really, people, this has been done 20 some times, and you just can't and you can't do it. Why? Come on. So
Well, yeah.
let's get early cultivating. That's going to be my number one focus.
Yeah, I guess it's not to add insult to injury, but it's a little funny when you consider how big of an egg community we are here in Minnesota to not have the forethought to, realize you can't really sell something if you don't have it grown and ready to sell. So I don't know. I
Spoken
mean,
like a true Albert Lee person.
yeah, I mean, hey man, I live on the edge of town, just drive a few blocks, I see cows, you know what I mean? So and my family originally was a farming family down here in southern Minnesota. So, I mean, we're just ready and waiting at this point, but everyone is. And I already know a lot of business owners that are, small businesses that have spent, a decent six-figure sum on acquiring land, acquiring businesses, and prolonging all of this just kind of hurts them and honestly gives an advantage to all the out-of-state operators. So I don't know. I mean,
And the people who don't follow the rules. That's one of the other frustrating things. Like right now, there is no incentive to follow the rules. There isn't. You'd be stupid not to be bending the rules and going through every loophole. And that's a sign of a very, very poorly thought out bill.
So do you think then, I mean, do you have any regrets voting for this in terms, or like if you could go back then, would you have still voted for this knowing what you know now? I'll rephrase that. Or do you
Well,
really
I
think you would
mean,
have waited for something more well thought out? I mean, I'm not
so
judging you based on what you say at all. I'm just
yeah,
curious.
no, I mean, honesty is the easiest thing to do in the world. Um, I have anxiety about this being like in New York level of embarrassing rollout. And then it's like I helped lead the charge on this, and it's like, oh my God. I at least have the very legitimate deniability of, well, I was the minority, so I couldn't shape as much policy as I would have liked.
Hmm.
But I did believe at the time that I think this is a horrible way to make law, but they were saying we just need to pass this and we'll fix it next year, which is a horrible, 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 horrible way to make law and should never be done. But it was done, and I was like, okay, yeah, we can fix this. We can fix this next year. I thought my vision of what fixing meant was clearly different than what it has turned out to be. So, like, I wouldn't say regret. I do not regret it because it was the right policy at the high level. But I do have anxiety. Like I am anxious I'm stressed out about it a little bit because I just don't have that much confidence that it's gonna roll out very well at this point. There still is plenty of time. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not like really aggressive about saying how terrible everything is because there's plenty of time to fix this. I mean, that there isn't really, but there's plenty of time left in session to fix this. Uh, and if we get it right, like so say we take our extra time to get it right, that's going to shave off a lot of months.
Hmm.
But just pushing it out the door was a huge mistake in hindsight because if they spent rather than passing it last year, if they just took the time to lay everything out, then take an interim to really put in the nuts and bolts, get everything figured out, and then pass it early, like say, yeah, about right now, passing the completed bill that's well thought out, and then on July 1st, everything can kick off. I
Hmm.
think that was eminently doable. But the reason they didn't do that, I mean, if we want to dig into this, is because the legal marijuana parties, they wanted to make sure that they were not going to be relevant in the November election. That's why they felt like they had to pass horse shit laws in order to
To
get
be
that out of
fair,
the way.
that's pretty valid though. Oh my God.
That's exactly what I like. Literally, I mean, that's abundantly clear. That is the truth. It's all, I mean, it's always power, money, money, and power. Those are the only things that ever dictate what goes on down there. And it is because they were worried about the legal marijuana now parties, which honestly, those are like the most effective parties in the country, honestly, because them getting major party status is literally the reason that this happened. Because I don't believe they would have done it otherwise, because there was enough of these people who are from another time that didn't think it needed to be done. So
A nice way to put it.
yeah, that's why they did it in such a horrible way. And unfortunately, winning elections does generally make politicians make idiotic decisions. But we are here now, and I hope that we get serious about getting it up and running, because the longer it goes, like the longer the black market operates, is the more you have stories of cannabis being dangerous, even though it's not. Because it's dangerous because, oh, somebody gets shot in a drug deal. Oh, it had some other substance in it that caused something, but cannabis is never the actual cause of any of these problems, but it can lead to these if it's illegal. But if it was a safe and regulated product, this wouldn't happen. And that delay is very concerning. Like it's frustrating. But anyways, that is what we need: early cultivation. If we don't take that seriously, it's gonna be fourth quarter 2025.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good fundamental point to hammer home. For those that don't know then, like what is the tentative timeline right now for the current session that's going on? How urgent is this matter? What should people be doing? You know, should we light a fire under their butts, or do they have a little bit of time to type up a nice letter to their politician and shoot it off?
Well, the Greater Cannabis Bill will be voted on Wednesday, so March 27th. And anybody can sign up to testify and make their case. And what I would argue, and what I would very much appreciate as somebody who is to vote on this later, is have people go there and say, we need early cultivation if we want this market to start on time and be successful. Because if they don't do actual early cultivation, it's not going to happen. So if I were to distill it into one point, it would be, hey, why don't you show up March 27th at the 1 p.m. committee hearing that'll probably last many, 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 many hours, and advocate for licenses to be given early to cultivators. And I would also argue that they should be given to social equity and non-social equity applicants. But if that's not what we just need, early cultivation. I'm not that picky, but if I were to write it, I would say, well, we need all hands on deck, not just one segment of society.
I feel you there. I don't want to take too much of your time, but is there anything else that you're working on non-cannabis related that you'd want to let people know about?
Well, I mean, working on some, well, Highway 65 is always my thing, but like, I don't like, that's the other issues I don't think people really care about, who would be listening to this. So,
Hey, you never know, but yeah, I got you.
In the like if I was in the majority, I would have a lot more to say. But in the minority, it's like, well, I don't want people to think that I can do things that I can't.
That's fair. I'm not trying to overpromise. I just figured I'd give people a little window into your life and to what
This is
you
my couch.
are working on.
I've got 2 dogs. Oh no.
Um,
Oh,
do
he's
you have
got
any
toilet paper. Yeah, I'm talking to you, bad dog. Charlie, come here. Okay, yeah, no, he's completely annihilated something over there. I think it's a roll of toilet paper.
Oh no, not the toilet paper.
Yeah, little mischievous corgi. But
Well,
he's so cute. Look
he's
at him.
adorable. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Do you have any words of advice for anyone that might be younger watching this that might want to get into politics or become a representative for their own community?
Well, being a young candidate is awesome. Like everybody wants to see young people. The last thing they want to see is some geezer doing it. So like if you want to, well, yeah, get after it. But be prepared for people to try and like make your life a living hell. So there's also like, don't jump into it haphazardly and actually have a plan for victory. But I would encourage basically anybody who is young to run. but also run with humility. So it's like, oh, I call them geezers, but also you don't know what you don't know. And there is so much to learn. Like every legislator who gets there in their first term has no idea what they're doing. I thought I knew exactly what I was going to do when I got there, and no, I still was like, oh, wait, what? This is how it works? So I would say every young person should really consider running, but the two things they need are, well, one, you need to raise some money. Sadly, that's really number one, because you can't win without money. And number two is have humility, because you might think you might be on your righteous crusade, and it might be a righteous crusade, but there is so much that you don't know. And one, humility looks good on everyone. Nobody looks bad being humble, and also you should be, because I like, you would not believe how smart you'll never be the smartest person when you go there, and there is so much to learn, and that is the best part of the job. But if you're one of those people that goes there and has to stick up their butt and pretends like they know everything, you're not going to learn. And well, if you're a competitive district, you'll probably lose eventually, or you'll never win, and you'll lose an awesome opportunity to learn so much, because that is my favorite part of the job. It's so cool to be able to learn from literally, like, I got to learn, I had a whole science class about cannabinoids and all this stuff that I now know. And then I also have sat down with the Connexus Energy CEO and learned all this stuff about the energy grid. And I've gotten to tour nuclear plants. And it's like the opportunity to learn is honestly one of the coolest. It is easily the coolest part of the job. So people think of all these other things, but it's just incredible, the opportunity that I get, and I feel so lucky to do it. It's just tremendous. I have a really good time, even in the minority. It is incredibly frustrating. Get ready for that if you run for office, but even in the minority, it's still a tremendous opportunity that you never get tired of. Every time you walk to that gorgeous building that is the Capitol, it's still amazing. And it's like, the day it's not amazing is the day you should then hang it up, because yeah, you're done, and you've obviously served long enough, and you should leave on your own terms, because that's another thing people need to learn. Leave on your own terms. Don't make it ugly the way you exit the place, because that's not good.
That
But yeah.
sounds like some sage advice, honestly, though. I guess I've never thought about it like that. Um, I suppose that kind of wraps everything up about this. I'm sure we'll talk again when more progress is made, hopefully good. Other than that, I just want to say thank you for your time. Are you open to people reaching out to you? Where can people find you if you are?
Oh, yeah, you can email me at rep.nolan.west@house.mn.gov, or on Facebook is also a good option, because I'd love to get messages that aren't spam bots. That would be nice. But it is just, oh my goodness, it's just overrun with those now. It's hard to say. I have 52 messages, and 50 of those are spam bots. It's ridiculous.
Uh,
It's very annoying.
I know how that goes, man. It's a pain. People are like, why don't you ever answer me or write back? It's like, bro, just
Right.
text me. Just text me.
Yeah, that's
Email
why
me.
email is better. Text, I am terrible at text, as you have found out, just because it's like I get like 15 an hour,
You know,
and that's why it's like, oh, please badger me, please, or else it won't come back up the list. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. Wednesday they hear the bill. So Wednesday, if you want to testify on the bill, the cannabis bill, Wednesday, 1 p.m. In the Commerce Committee. It should be. I mean, I bet you it'll be a packed room, so it might be hard to get in there, but it will be interesting to see what path this bill takes. And even after that, there is a long way to go.
yeah, you can say that again.
Oh, and
It's
there's the cat.
exciting though, even
Yeah,
with
I
its
got a lot
ups
of
and
animals.
downs. What?
That's the cat. See, look at that floofy tail. Okay,
Oh,
we can end with this cat here. This is one of the greatest cats ever. Hey, Penny, Penny,
oh, what a beautiful
I'm
cat.
talking to you. Hey, leave Penny alone. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
what
it's
a
a little
sweetheart.
calico, but look at how fluffy her tail is. It's just a super fluff tail. Yeah, she's a very good kitty.
She looks like it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you for your time, man. Until
Yeah,
next time, and good luck up there at the Capitol, man.
yeah. Wednesday is the day. We'll see how it goes.
Hell
And
yeah.
my bill's on Monday. If you want to see me present a bill, it'll be very exciting. All right.
Oh, where can we check that out? Is that going to be
Well,
live?
ooh. Yeah, it'll be Monday at the Commerce Committee. Starts at 1 p.m. I'm the last bill on the agenda, so we'll see when I actually get up there. But
Okay.
there will be a lot of cannabis bills heard in that day. So
Ooh.
that caregiver bill I mentioned about the medical cannabis patients and registering, that is also going to be Monday, 1 p.m. So
Okay. Yeah,
yes.
most of that is live streamed on YouTube for anyone that doesn't know. So it should be easy to Google and find. But this has been a true Minnesotan goodbye. I really appreciate the time. Until next time, and it was great getting to know your pets. They are adorable.
Yes, they are.
Peace, my dude.
Farewell.